Okay, so let's go over our schedule. We're gonna slow it down. Today we're gonna talk about I Have a Dream. Your choice speech annotations, we'll talk about today because I don't have you next time, but I'm also gonna talk about next time. So you need to have those annotated and not like chosen your speech, you've annotated it by the 12th, so when you come next time. We're gonna do some stuff with political ad campaigns, which is exciting and fun. And then we'll have a writing day, and you'll just be turning in that by, I think, the end of the term. I have like the speech stuff on here. We're gonna bump your final to the beginning of quarter 2. So you'll still take it because it's a timed analysis, right? But I wanted to slow things down because it seems like we can't keep up. And now there's something in my eyeball. Really? How is that even possible? Gross. Okay. So yeah, hopefully that will be a little bit easier for you guys to keep up with. All of your late work is due by October 20th, okay? Term ends on the 23rd, but I need time to grade it so that I can give you a grade, right? So I haven't been taking off points for late work because this term sucks. But you do need to turn it in by that time because otherwise I just won't have time to grade it. So it's not like I hate you, just I can't do it. So get it in by then. That's the day after fall break. So I won't see you that week. So you'll just need to be working on that, either catching up over fall break, or if you want to have a delightful fall break before that. Yes, Reed?
What day does fall break start?
The 15th. So that is nice. And then you guys are coming back. There wasn't originally school on the 20th, but there is now because we're not doing, like the teachers usually do professional development on that day, and they decided to space it out or something because COVID or something. I don't really understand their choices, but yes.
So like the whole like phase 2 thing is still like TBD because we went for like that phase 1 thing.
Yeah, they're hoping to do it like when term 2 starts. I'm hoping it happens because I think that will be easier on you than watching my lovely voice over video, but I don't know. I honestly don't know what they'll decide to do. So when I know, you'll know. Or you might even know before I know because that's the way it seems to go these days. So cool. Other questions on that? Okay, so we're going to talk about your first time right. Good job for doing it, those of you who did it. The rest of you need to get it together and do it. Everyone did like a pretty good job, but nobody is yet ready for the AP exam. So, which is fine. It is September and we have until May. But we all need to do better. And so on your drafts, I made comments, not like a ton, but like brief comments that were gonna be like the most effective things in helping you. So if you go on Canvas, you click on the assignment and then you push view feedback. It will have annotated feedback, and then sometimes I put it in like the comments box. It just depended on the kind of feedback. I think maybe I made annotated stuff and then just like made another comment over here to kind of sum up the stuff. I gave everyone full points for doing it because it's like a scary thing, right? It's your first time right. It's very stressful. So I was proud of you guys for doing it. But I want to go over some things that are going to make your next one better because that's going to be your term final, right? So let's first look at these sentences. These are not from your drafts. They're from stuff in years past because I didn't want to, embarrass you if I pull something out of your essay. But many of you wrote sentences much like these.
Right.
So, Wolf uses tone to convey her purpose in her narrative. What does that tell me about her piece?
Nothing.
Yeah, basically nothing, right? Because if you're writing something, you're going to have a tone whether you purposely craft that or not, right? Because everyone uses words, and words have connotations which create a tone, okay? We don't know what her purpose is, we don't know what the tone is. Basically, I could replace Wolf with any author's name and this would apply, but it wouldn't tell me anything, right? Wolf bonds the reader to the topic through the way she writes. What does that even mean? I don't really know. She's making me care about it by the way that she writes. Again, I don't really know anything specific about that essay. This one's pretty good. Wolf introduces her major ideas through the examples she gives. One example where she does this. Again, I still have no idea what you're going to be talking about, like in that paragraph. This came up a lot throughout the passage. Wolf uses specific diction to get her point across. Hint, any writing has diction because you are using words. So we want to be more specific, right? We want to look at, okay, great, you notice that she's using, and I'm sure that you're noticing like those loaded words and stuff, but what do they have in common? What patterns of diction do you notice? She uses a lot of words that mean light. She uses a lot of words that are sad, right? Like even stuff as basic as that can help you get closer to having something analytical to say. So I know that in your mind, like you're noticing patterns, but you want to be specific and tell your reader what those patterns are. So for help on your next essay, here are some bulleted things that you should remember. And I have put this on the weekly overview under number 1. There's like a big old link. So you could look at this before your next attempt. So you want to look at the comments that I left on your first time writing. Okay, that is going to be more specific than anything I'm saying right now, but that will help you. Okay, I give you comments not just because I'm bored, but because I want you to improve and I want you to know how. Because it's if I'm just like do better, what does that tell you? Nothing, right? It's not very good teaching. Then you want to review the attack summary before writing. If you're trying to do the attack summary and read that through while you're writing, you're not going to get like anything done, right? Because it's like that's going to take a lot of your time. So read through that like a couple of times. A lot of us would have done better if we had been like, okay, I need to put my thesis statement in like a formula like this, right? Instead of, you would have felt better, you would have been able to notice things because you're like, I need to find 2 rhetorical devices to talk about, so I had better be looking for those as I'm reading through the passage, right? So that is really going to help you, and if you, like, yes, it might feel like boring, but like this test, you're just trying to beat the test, right? I already know that you're very smart. So now we just need to play their game, jump through their hoops to like pass that exam. You also want to review your rhetorical toolbox before writing. Because if you can't identify techniques or you don't know what you're looking for, that's going to make your essay very vague. You're not going to have a lot to say. So we've talked about things like anaphora and repetition. We've talked about anecdotes. We've talked about a bunch of different techniques in the course of our speaking, but you need to remember what those are so that you could look for them as you're reading. One of the things basically that we have cut from this term are like, usually I give you a quiz on like tone words. Usually I give you a quiz on like different rhetorical devices, but because we don't have a lot of time, like, okay, I don't want to waste time in class giving you a quiz on that. And so you're going to have to just remember those on your own. I could print out, like, or put out a list or whatever, and I put those on Canvas so you can look over stuff, but I'm not going to quiz you on it because I don't want to waste our class time on that. So you're just going to have to remember the things that we're talking about in class. Yeah?
Do you know if the AP test is going to be shorter this year or anything?
I don't know yet, and I think that they're waiting to make that decision until probably the last possible moment.
Super cool.
Yeah, which is super lame, but if anything, this, like, if they do shorten it, it will be this analysis essay, because that's what they did last year, is they just made it just the analysis essay. So definitely this is the best bang for your buck. Okay. Okay, so if it asks you how language conveys purpose, which it will, you want to define what the author's purpose is as part of your response. So in the Virginia Woolf one, it talked about how Woolf uses language to convey lasting significance of these moments from her past. You'd want to talk about what that lasting significance was for her. Like, why is she writing about this? Why was this an important moment? Some of us just plugged that in, which was a great first attempt because that's what you're like in the attack summary really quick. You're like, okay, plug that in, right? But you want to go deeper and be like, okay, to convey what was the lasting significance? Well, the lasting significance, I think she was talking about the bittersweetness of in life you have to make choices, right? And in making those choices, you cut off certain futures for yourself, right? While opening other ones. But the great thing about memory is that you can go back to those moments and kind of relive or reimagine what that would have been like. So kind of this bittersweetness of being human forces us to lose certain futures, but we can also explore those in our minds, right? So something like that. Some of you tried like to do that, and that was great. You guys were like, okay, her purpose is this, or like this was the lasting significance, but most of us didn't quite get there. Then you want to talk about specific rhetorical devices. So some of us kind of were just like vaguely, like she writes really well about her experiences to show the lasting significance. You're not really getting into like, okay, what choices is she making to show that? Some of us went a little bit better, and they were like, she uses imagery and diction, right? Okay, well, at least you're talking about something specific. But then talk about the patterns of those things. So she uses imagery, like water imagery, like so some sort of pattern that she's looking at that she's using imagery to describe. So then you can talk about why she does that. Or with diction, you could say like she uses light and dark like diction to talk about whatever. So maybe you're seeing that contrast, and then you're saying, why is she making that contrast? Well, it shows this certain thing. So you're just being more specific, because I know that you're noticing patterns, because we talk about patterns in class all the time. Now you just need to like put that into your writing. So we did that, yeah. You want to pull multiple examples from the text into your body paragraph to support the generalizations you're making. So if you're saying things like, this person is attacking this specific part of society, that's like a generalization, so you need to support that with multiple examples. If you just pull one, you can't really make that assessment, because it could just be like, at one point she does, but that's not what she's doing throughout the whole thing. So you want to make sure that you're pulling multiple things. They don't have to be long, because some of you picked really long examples. So if you're talking about diction, just pull those words that are creating the tone. Or like, if you're talking about imagery, just pull those images, just very short. But you want to have multiple in your essay. Because most of us could get like one example, but some of us a lot. There are only a few of us who are pulling multiple. Also, handwrite your response. So I think I definitely said that before, but the reason you don't want to type is because then your timing is going to be off in May when they make you handwrite it. If they happen to let us type it, then you'll just be better off for having handwritten, because now you'll be faster. But you don't want to go from typing to then handwriting, because A, maybe your handwriting is not good and you need the practice, and B, it takes longer to handwrite something. So make sure that you're handwriting and that you are uploading it in a clear photo. That was also an issue. Some of them I couldn't read. So make sure I can, like when you take it, it's in a well-lit area on a flat surface. I can see the whole thing. Okay. Also, not editorializing about the quality of the text. I think I forgot the word text. I need to add that. But talking about the choices that the writer is making, not how well they do it. So some of you were like, she uses really great imagery. Neato, but not applicable to her purpose. Like she uses this specific type of imagery to convey her purpose, right? So you don't need to make her feel better about herself. She's a famous author. She doesn't need your pat on the back, right? You're just talking about the rhetorical choices she's making and how she conveys it. And then watching out again for those generic sentences that could be lifted out of this essay and applied to any other essay. You're being specific, because when you're analyzing, you're looking at something very closely and explaining it. So it shouldn't be able to be just like lifted out and put somewhere else. Okay? Questions about that? Okay. So in your final, when you do it again, maybe look over the slide, make sure that you're looking over that tax summary a few times. The choice speech annotations and the choice speech analysis paper are going to help you, because even though it's not a timed thing, you're going to be digging in really deeply to these speeches, and you'll have enough time to do it. So you'll be applying like a NAFRA, like we've talked about. You'll be looking for patterns of diction, patterns of imagery. This is the same stuff you're doing in the time right, but this is just a not timed setting. So that can help you practice those skills so that you can then apply them to your time right. It just, the only difference is one is much speedier, right? Okay, cool. Questions about that? But I'm excited for you guys. You're going to get so much better. Excited. It's going to be great. I'm going to fix this and put text here before I forget, because sometimes I type too fast and forget. Okay. So again, that is like right here. So you could look over that next time you go to write the new sort of schedule of what we're doing in classes right here. Your choice speech annotations are gonna be due by the 12th. So, you're gonna pick your speech. Again, you can go to AmericanRhetoric.com. There's a ton of speeches on there. If you don't want to do anything from America, you don't have to. You could pick a speech by like Joseph Stalin or by, Hitler. I can only think of like crazy people who speak in other countries. I don't know, my deal is. There are people who are nice. You could do Nelson. I'm sure Nelson Mandela has given speeches, right? So there's a good example. Something happy. But you can pick whatever you want. You can pick one from a movie. But you want to make sure that whatever you pick, you have enough to analyze. That's like the key. Okay, I'm saying that open it again. There we go. So if you go to the annotation assignment, there's a paper that you can click on, and it brings up these steps that you should follow once you have your speech. So I guess the first step is actually choose a speech. Just in case you didn't know that was a step, you do need to have a speech before you start to annotate it, right? You want to print it out. I guess if you can figure out how to do it digitally on your own, like that's fine. You could like digitally annotate it, but if that is like beyond you, just print it out, okay? You can use like the printer down in the library. So then you're going to look for something that gives you enough to analyze, but not too long to cover your essay. So as you're reading through and you're kind of perusing, trying to make your choice, look for like, am I noticing techniques that they're using that I could then analyze, right? If you're not, and you're like, this is going to be too hard, like I can't see anything, don't pick that speech, pick a different one, okay? Because you get to pick whatever you want. That's great. The sweet spot is probably like 3 to 6 pages. That's kind of what we've been doing in class 2. Something super long, you're probably not going to be able to cover everything that you need to show how they're conveying purpose. If it's too short, that's difficult because you don't have enough to pull from, right? So look for one in that kind of page range. Then, step 2, you want to research the context of the speech. So like, with I Have a Dream, this was given in August of 1963. It was very hot, because it's DC, right, which is near Virginia, so very warm. They were expecting only about 100,000, which still sounds like a lot, but they got 250,000 people there, so it's very crowded. They marched from the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial, and at the time, so that's like the same place where the inauguration speeches are typically given. If you've seen Forrest Gump, like that's where he's giving that speech. This is the same area, right? So this was the most people that had ever gathered there up to that point. I think there have been bigger ones now, but at the point, that was like the biggest one. And so Martin Luther King had organized this as a peaceful protest for civil rights. And he gets there and there's a ton more people than he expected. So that's kind of your context. We'd also want to know that Martin Luther King Jr., what was his profession? Does anyone know? They called him a doctor because he had like a doctorate, but he was, yes, a preacher, right? He was a reverend. So he gave, so he was really good at sermons and had like a religious quality to a lot of what he was saying. Anything else we should know about? Okay. Cool. And his audience, mostly Black Americans, but also some white Americans mixed in there too, okay? So you want to do that, kind of think about the rhetorical triangle, context, and purpose, okay? Then you're going to do your first read-through of the speech, and you're going to divide that speech into major sections. So, okay, here he's talking about this, 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 because then you're seeing how his purpose like morphs over it, what themes he's pulling through. In those major sections, there's often shifts in tone that you can talk about, okay? And then you do a section-by-section analysis. So looking at those, here is a list of possible major choices. Things like analogies, allusions, where you're talking about another text within your text. Maybe the order of how he does it, maybe that is really strategic, right? Anaphora, repetition, rhetorical questions, juxtaposition is good. The rhetorical triangles, your ethical, emotional, and logical fields. And anything else that you can talk about, right? So you'll go through and you'll mark all those. I often will mark far more things going on than I talk about in an essay. Because I'll be like, oh, that's cool, but then I'm like, oh, okay, looking at the purpose of it, it's kind of like just this cool thing that it does, but it's not really adding to that, or I can't make a very strong argument for a whole paragraph about that. And that's okay, like, you're just, when you're given a text, you're just like digging in and seeing what you can find. And then I look for, okay, what patterns are carried throughout the whole thing, or what patterns are most important to the purpose, and that's what I talk about in my essay, okay? Questions about that? Okay, so that's what you'll be doing with your choice speech this week, and you will take a picture of your speech and upload it, and it will be very clear so I can look at it. I don't want you to like just hand it in to me, because I want you to have those so you can make your outline and then write your paper. So if you give me your annotations, you can't do that. So if for some reason you can't upload a picture of it, like it's just not working, just come in and show me, and I will mark it off for you so that you still get to keep those, okay? Cool. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the greatest speech in American history, the I Have a Dream speech. So pull up your annotations if you've already done them. We're going to walk through it together. And so even if you've already done it, this is useful because people are going to pick up different things than what you picked up. Okay? And if you didn't do it, well, this will just help you because you're a slacker. Okay? Cool. So I'm going to read through. We're going to chunk it up kind of like we've done before. You'll talk to someone next to you because that's the whole point of being in class, so you can get human interaction, and then we'll talk about it, okay? Okay. This is such a good speech. I'm so excited. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon, light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. Or still is not free. I can read, it's fine. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. Okay. So looking just at that section, turn to someone next to you and talk about the choices you notice he's making. Go. Speed.
So the words he uses in making the speech or something is he's kind of being associated.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And then still kind of like, and then so every time what's going on.
Like, this is the repeated cycle, like a long, and like, I guess this is all the thing, like,
kind of like,
powerful
it's
imagery
but
is
it's not.
like, still sad because of the minute, and like, towards the end of the discrimination, was kind of like, really showing that, hey, enslavement isn't physically, it's still,
A lot of words
really confused,
describe
the
state of the class.
social injustices
There
that
is
they
shame,
as
there's
it,
discrimination,
these are the
there's
same
language.
imagery, the same way, and he conveys that through the imagery of the like chains.
All right, what choices do you notice? What are things we should note? I heard lots of good things. So. Nathan, what's one thing you noticed going on in this first section?
Repetition.
Okay, where?
It said 100 years later, over and over again,
Okay, why do you think he does that?
to drill in the reader's mind that like there's lots of stuff that's still around.
Yeah, and it's been 100 years, which seems like a long time. That's like, at this point, especially more than people are living, right? That's a long freaking time, and we still got all these problems, right? And so by repeating it, if you just said like 100 years later and then like went on, you might forget it, but like the repetition of it, the anaphora, right, where it's at the beginning, drills that home. Okay, good. What else do you guys notice? Yeah.
He starts the speech in almost the same way as Lincoln did, in like those two paragraphs.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to.
Right? So 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Dude, that means 100 years. Yes, a score is 20 years, right? So he says that because in Lincoln's speech, he starts out 70 years ago, our fathers, right? So he's alluding, right? It's an allusion to Lincoln. Why would you allude to Lincoln?
He's trying to link his cause to Lincoln's cause.
What was Lincoln's cause?
Freeing the slaves.
Freeing the slaves, right? So he's linking it to this man who's known for freeing the slaves, right? He's like, okay, now we're going to talk about how we're still not free, right? Awesome. What else do you guys notice? Do we have any loaded words, any diction we should note? Autumn?
So like kind of in the third paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
he talks about how they're still like crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination, right? And that's like, he uses this big imagery to convey like, hey, in slavery it's like these like physical chains, but now these social injustices are still just as inhibiting.
Yeah.
And so it really like creates a powerful image in your mind of like, hey, we all agree that like slavery is bad, like we are at that point. And it's like, hey, this is just as bad and just as real and just as like an issue.
Totally. And you see, like, in that second paragraph, he talks about the slaves have been seared in the flames of withering injustice. And here, like, lonely island of poverty, talks about crippled by the manacle. So he's like drawing the parallelism, like, yes, slavery is bad. We can all agree on that. It's still just as bad today. And he's taking something where he's talking about civil rights, right? That is an intangible thing. You can't just be like, here are your civil rights, take them, right? It doesn't work like that. But he ties it to these very physical things in this speech to show how bad it is, right? To bring it home more concretely for them. Good. Anything else we should note? Yeah.
Well, this is not really just for this section, but he keeps using words like flames or hot or sweltering throughout the whole
Good.
speech. And so I'm not quite sure why.
That would be good to know though, right? If you see the pattern, mark it, because hopefully by the end you can kind of realize what is going on. I like that you noticed that. He also uses words like light, right? And then what does he talk about being as dark? Slavery and captivity. So he's using that juxtaposition there between light and dark. Also, remembering our context, this is a very hot day, right? They are probably very warm because they're all very close together, getting the Rona, if the Rona existed, right? But very hot, very sweaty, and so he's bringing that in. And if you're like sitting there being like, oh, I'm so hot and sweaty, stuff that is hot and sweaty, like flames, and really warm stuff, is going to feel worse to you at that moment than if you were freezing. You might be like, that sounds delightful if you're freezing. But he like kind of capitalizes on the context, which is, it is freaking hot out here, and that sucks, just like slavery sucks, right? So it's kind of, I like that he's drawing that in. Cool. Anything else? This ought to be a great speech. Okay, let's keep reading. Get stoked. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has become marked, or which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Okay, talk to your neighbor about what you noticed. So good.
Makes us check. I guess the Constitution. Not exactly, I guess it I don't know why he's making the analogy.
So
but
they know
yeah.
what it's like to be
Yeah.
You know what, like cherishes
buy something and like check out to someone.
Or like he talks about
So because of like
passing a check or
like
that's really powerful.
because of all the stuff that
You
they've
know,
done,
and like something that a lot of people
in
don't see.
instances,
Like
they're
this desire
basically
for
saying, hey, you need to pay us, but you need to pay back what we did.
Okay, let's talk about what you noticed. What do you notice in this section? Sydney, give me something you noticed.
I just noticed that he used juxtaposition with like the dark and desolate, and just like kind of giving more of an imagery just in saying like
Totally, right?
racial justice, but like the dark and desolate valley.
Yeah, so dark and desolate valley of segregation, sunlit path of racial justice, juxtaposition there. I love that you're using the term. Makes my teacher heart very happy. Okay, good. Showing just like the stark contrast between the two choices before them. Also, this language, does this sound like language from anywhere else? Maybe that's like a bad question. Sometimes I ask bad questions. But this sounds kind of biblical, right? Like desolate valley of segregation, sunlit path. So we're going to see some more of this where he's using almost like biblical language because what is his profession? He's a pastor, he's reverend, right? So he would definitely use some of that because that's who he is, but also because America right now, like what religion are they? Most of them are Christian in some form or another, right? So he's capitalizing on this common background that they have, okay? What else do you guys notice in this section? Cassandra, something you noticed in this section? Oh, Sandy, the worst.
He's talking about like how they go to like cash their check and it's a bad check, and it's like an analogy because everybody at that time, most people had been to the bank before, so they know what it's like. Maybe not to have a bad check, but they know what it's like to wait for the bank to do that.
Yeah, right, analogy. I love that you use that term. So he's using this analogy because everybody knows, right? Everybody, especially like today we Venmo each other, right? So we're like, what, that check? Like, that doesn't work right. But everyone got checks back then. They talk about how like, yes, we have this promissory note, and now we've come to check it, and there's insufficient funds, and that is not okay. Because when you get a check, like especially like a paycheck, you have done the work to earn that money, right? And then if you don't get it, that's an injustice, right? Because you're owed that. Well, every member of the American population is owed the rights that America says that they've earned just by being an American, right? And so it's an injustice in that way too. They're owed this, and yet they're not receiving it. They put in the work of just being human and living there and like contributing to society, and yet they're not reaping any of the benefits that America says that they should have. They also talk about, going with the check, there's some anaphora. We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds. Why would they repeat, like, I can't talk. We refuse to believe. Why repeat that? Okay, what if, thinking about like their white audience, right? They're like, okay, well you want too much, right? Like you want, like that's a lot that you're asking for, this equality thing, right? If they believe that, then what they're believing is that America isn't as great as they say it is. That it can't do all the things that it promises to. And so by saying that they refuse to believe that this is possible, that they're not gonna get their rights, they're saying, we believe in America, don't you? Right? Like kind of like, oh, snap. If you're saying that you can't give us these rights, you're saying you don't believe that America is great enough as a country to do what it says it's gonna do. So get it together. And then he ends it, again, along that religious line, make justice a reality for all of God's children, right? Uniting them under that Christian foundation that they all have. Okay? Anything else you want to know about this section? Yeah.
This is kind of just in like the whole thing, but I just kind of noticed it in this section how he always uses we.
Good.
And, like everything to like represent like, hey, this is a whole people that you're affecting, and so it's like we feel this way, or like we are mistreated like this, but like implying like, hey, this is like a large population of America.
Good, right? Yeah, definitely that unity piece is huge, especially like I'm one person saying this, but I'm the voice of many, which would be important to convey. Anything else? Yeah.
The sentence that says, this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of capitalism. Now is the time to make like real promises, and like we need to act now, we need to be fast, this needs to be changed.
Good, right? And that anaphora of now is the time. Now is the time. It like hits us over the head that now is the time. Like there's a sense of urgency that he's building. And this kind of, no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. One of the arguments being made during this time is, well, it's not going to happen overnight. You need to like calm down, because just give us time and we'll get there. And they're like, it has been how many years? 100 years, which he has just beat us over the head with, right? And he's like, we're not waiting anymore. This is an urgent thing. And if you are just saying, oh, we need gradualism, that is like a drug, right? It's a tranquilizer, right? To like make you feel better about it. But we need to, we need to do something now. And so he's creating this tone of urgency throughout the entire piece. Anything else? Oh, this is so fun. Okay, let's read the next part. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads to the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic, I guess there's like a page right here? That's weird. Wasn't there before? We must not, again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we will march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Okay, talk to your neighbor about what you notice in those sections. Go.
We cannot be satisfied in the job and
But also this is about we can never be satisfied or we are not satisfied.
I didn't understand about it.
Like that's
Reinforce ideas that they aren't maybe that they themselves are Also, I wonder if the whole soul thing was good.
Okay, what do you notice going on? There's lots of good stuff. Anissa, what's something that you noticed in this section?
I liked the part where he talks about if their destiny is tied up with our destiny, their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. So it kind of brings it all together that if you're not on their side and you're not trying to help get the freedom of blacks, then your destiny is reliant on this subject.
Good. If you think this doesn't apply to you, it applies to you, right? I think Barack Obama did a good job of this in his speech too, right? Where he's like, if there's like a grandma who can't get what she needs, like that affects me even if she's not my grandma. If there's a child who can't, whatever, like he brought those together in his speech, and that's like a huge part of America, right? Is that unity, and so bringing his audiences together, right? Where there's segregation, right? So there's definitely two audiences here, and he's like, this applies to you. You need to pay attention because this affects you. What else? Beckett, what's something that you noticed in this section?
The last paragraph, he keeps using anapra, that was called, but he says, like, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so he repeats over and over, we will never be satisfied. So why do you think he does that?
Cause I guess that's like a common argument of people at the time, so it's just kinda like disproving it.
Yeah, like, you're so needy. When will you be satisfied? Like, it's never enough for you, right? He's like, we will never be satisfied. We'll never be satisfied. I think it's a cool paragraph because it follows the one before it. So the one before it, this one is like the one that you just talked about, so we can never be satisfied as long as all of these things are happening. But here he's talking about, he says, we must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. This marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead to distrust of all white people. Okay, what is he talking about here? Does anyone know? This new militancy? Okay, so during this time there's Martin Luther King, and his main, platform is nonviolent protest, right? He's like, we need to show them that they're wrong, but we need to do it in a way that is not violent. because he's very Christian, and he takes those ideals to heart. Then there's another vein of thinking during this time, via Malcolm X. And Malcolm X he's mad, right? He's like, why should we, like, be nice, right? We can be violent. What is being done to us is wrong, so let's be violent. Let's mess things up so that people notice and want to change, right? And so, right here, he's responding to that train of thought and saying, that's not the way we do this. What we do is we continue on the high road, and we make a difference non-violently. Because when we resort to violence, what does that do to our message? It completely drowns it out, right? Because they're like, what are you doing? Like that's not right. Like, why would we listen to you if you're beating people, right? And so he's definitely here responding to like, okay, no, we don't take violent action. We're better than that. But that doesn't mean we don't take action. And so with that, we will not be satisfied. He's saying, I'm not telling you that you have to be okay with what's happening to you. I'm just saying, we need to do it in a better way. But no, we're not satisfied. So just because we're not violent doesn't mean we're okay, right? So that's like a cool order that I would pay attention to. What else do you guys notice in this section? Yeah. Oh, we'll go Larissa first. No.
Okay.
So it repeats a lot, like we cannot walk alone. So we walk and we march ahead. And then it says head with the team of travel. So like it's showing that they're all together in this, like they're in unity, and that they've been doing this for a long time. And it says with head with the team of travel.
Yeah, right. And we're gonna see that in the next section too, where he talks about like how they're tired and how they've been doing this for a long time. So I'm glad that you noticed it starting here. Adam?
Something I thought was kind of a cool little cute thing that he does is talk about how the legitimate discontent will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. How he kind of relates hey, this is a changing of the seasons, and the change of the seasons is kind of an unstoppable force, and it's something that just happens. So it brings a firmness to the argument and saying hey, this is something that's gonna happen, and it's gonna be new and refreshing, and he puts it in such a positive light by using words like freedom and equality, that things that are deeply rooted values of the American people, and he would reference a lot back to those. So it's just kind of cool that he uses hey, this is a changing of the seasons. It's something that's natural and it needs to happen.
I love that. Yeah. Very good. Yes. Yeah.
Another thing that I noticed is, he says, for many of our white brothers, as evidence by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and bound to their freedom is bound to our freedom. So it's like we can't walk alone because everybody can't be free to work free kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that intertwining of fates there. Like, you need to care. We've been separated for too long. And you're not saying that this affects you too. Okay, cool. I love it. And I also think, going back to that heat thing, right, the autumn, while they're sweltering at this speech, that would be a very effective image to put in their mind, right? Because they're feeling that. And I like how one thing can be doing multiple things, right? Because in a speech, you want the best bang for your buck. So you want something that is doing a lot of things. So that's good to notice too. Okay. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you, my friend, today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and paradise. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists and its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right there in Alabama, living little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Okay, talk to your neighbor, there's a lot going on there.
Like this is her speech, she's kind of like pushing for this urgency, by breaking it up and I can do today, I'm like, you're my kid, you make a lot of representations, and I'll be like, this is not, you know, and it's really a sense of urgency, and there's a lot of like, emotional appeals too, when you're thinking about like, oh, I see these kids together, like brothers and sisters, you know, it's like,
So
he pulls.
has a quote from Devotions you hold these truths
Yeah,
to be self-evident.
he does a really good job about that. I think of saying like, hey, this is everyone,
Appeal to
this is for everyone.
youth that he's using sports class.
Okay, cool. What do you guys notice? Yes.
So in that first paragraph you read, he talks about narrow jail cells and being battered by storms
Uh-huh.
and stuff. But that I thought might have been like a reference to Paul's journey,
Okay.
missionary journey.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I hadn't seen that, but I can see that, right? Yeah. Also just talking about like their physical condition where some of them have been in jail, some of them have like tried to fight for freedom and been punished for that, right? And many of them may be tired, right? Like they're like, I have been fighting for freedom and it's not working. Why would I keep doing this? And he's like, mm-mm. And kind of like Paul, fight the good fight, right? Because he says that, so I like that. But he's like, yes, a lot of crap has happened to you, but you don't stop. We're gonna keep doing this. So, and then he tells them that anaphora, go back to that place. Go back to Alabama. Go back, go back, go back. Why would he repeat that over and over? That's kind of a weird, like why would he want to repeat that idea? Looking at the paragraph before, he's like, you have suffered. And they're all gathered together. When you're gathered together, how do you feel? You feel what?
Powerful.
Powerful, right? Yeah, you're like together, you're a united front. It's a lot easier to do things in numbers. Then he says, go back, right? What happens when you go back from a big group to a smaller location? You're separating up, right? You're in smaller chunks. It gets a little scarier to stand out, right? But he's saying, go back and do this. Go back. Why? Because we need to go back knowing that somehow the situation can and will be changed. We're not going to wallow. You're going to go back and you're going to keep fighting this fight. Okay? And so, yes, he's telling them to go back, but to go back with hope. And then he starts this I have a dream section, right? Other things that you noticed. Yeah.
This whole like I have a dream section uses like so much of these like emotional appeals, especially when it's talking about like brotherhood and like these kids together, and like it just brings back really everything. And reading it, you can't help but feel like this emotional response. And this is like throughout the whole speech really, but like he's just talking about how, like, oh, you guys have been in jail, and like we have to go fight for this thing that's like that we can create something beautiful. And it's like, wow.
Yeah. And he's talking about your family, right? And a family's something that everyone has, whether or not like they're a good family or a bad family, right? Like you all have a family, you know what that's like, and most people have positive associations with their family, right? Do these things sound unreasonable that he's listing? No, these are like everyday things, especially for like white people, right? He's like, I'm not being unreasonable, but I'm creating these emotional responses in you. Okay, what if instead of saying, I have a dream, he's like, you're all racist because this, you're all racist because that, you're all racist, like, what does that do to his audience? Make him feel bad, right? He completely alienates the white race, because as soon as someone says that you're bad in some way, especially the racist word, like even today, right, you call someone a racist, and that's pretty offensive, you're like, because I don't want to be racist, I want to be kind. And so, if he goes out and he's like, you're all racist and you suck because of all of these things you're doing, that's not going to go over well, right? Instead, he's like, I have a dream. And you're like, ooh, I like that dream. That sounds nice. I want to be a part of that, right? I'm inspired by this dream. He's still telling them what is wrong with society because he's listing all these emotional appeals, right? But he's doing it in a way that you're like, oh man, I want to be part of the dream where that's better. And he shows like a positive way instead of this negative thing. He could get up and be like, you all suck, we need to be better, but he knows that that's not a way you inspire people. You inspire people by inviting them to be better and showing them what it can be like. So he's very thoughtful in doing that. When you want people to do what you want, do not tell them why they suck. Tell them like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, right? So he's very good at that. Anything else you guys notice in this section? Okay, let's bust through that last part. We're almost done. It's been so much fun that we're like almost done. It's crazy. Okay. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the south with. With this faith that we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith that we will be able to transform the jangling discord of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning, my country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's bride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening, I cannot say that word, Alleghenies, I probably butchered that, of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet and every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. We don't have a ton of time to discuss that. But very powerful, tons of anaphora, right? Especially at the end, you want to hit home the points that you were trying to make, so that they remember that and they take it with you. And this let freedom ring over and over, it's almost like these bells, like he's almost creating that ringing sensation in his words. References to Isaiah there, which is like the worst part of scriptures, because who understands what he's saying? But Isaiah is well known for prophecy, and so kind of creating this prophecy here at the end. When you're done doing this, you need to talk about what strikes you as being the most significant rhetorical strategy used in this speech. And then you write a paragraph defending your choice. Remember, a paragraph is an entire page, right? So you're going to pick one strategy, specific, not diction, right? Some sort of pattern of diction that we talked about, maybe religious diction. Or he uses like an emotional appeal specifically surrounding the family, right? That's some sort of specific thing that then conveys its purpose. And you need to identify what that purpose is, right? Questions? Okay, this week when you go home, you're finishing up that, you're turning that in, and you're annotating your choice speech, okay? Tomorrow in the video, we're going to be doing political ad campaigns, so tune in, 'cause it's going to be great.